Tony Shaffer got approval from his commanding general after this whole thing happened to write his memoirs. His memoirs are called Dark Heart. So he wrote the book. He had a publisher. He went to his commanding general to review the book as his protocol. His commanding general said, fine, Tony, there's nothing there that's a problem. Publish it. Tony publishes the book. Our deep state finds out he's publishing the book. A cease and desist order is issued against the publisher. Stop publishing the book. It's too late. Our government buys all 10,000 copies of the first edition of Dark Heart with taxpayer money, and they destroy them. So I asked Tony on a show last September, as I've done many times, Tony, you have the original version of the book, right? Yes, here it is, Congressman. You have the redacted version, right? Yes, here it is. What did they want out of your book that was so sensitive? What secret information were you giving, Tony? What classified information did your boss not see? He said, Congressman, the only thing they wanted out of my book was the fact that I named Zelikow and that I had briefed him in advance. That, Tucker, is treason. That means our agencies use their position not for something involving our national security, but for involving a cover-up of a person's identity who was publicly approved by the Congress of the United States, appointed by the security advisor to President Bush. It's a massive cover-up.
At what point following 9/11, since I just want to restate, you served in Congress for about 20 years, I think. Yep. And you really were at the heart of these questions, national security questions in the Congress. You were about to become chairman of Armed Services. So you're at the top of the pyramid for receiving relevant intelligence. At what point after 9/11, the attacks of that day, did you realize there's something bad going on here?
Well, it started before 9/11 when I realized that the intelligence I was getting as the vice chairman of the committee was not really solid intelligence. I would get better information from Bill Gertz, a reporter that you know,
yes,
coming to me with anonymous sources leaking to him,
yes,
about intel matters. And I would then go to the CIA and say, why am I getting this information from a reporter that I know you're leaking from classified sources that I'm not getting as a member of Congress who's the vice chairman of the Defense Committee? Are you playing games with me? And they wouldn't answer that. And that's what they do. They play games by manipulating the media to put out a narrative. And then we have to deal with that narrative. So, Tucker, what I did, there's a group in Washington that was known as the Cockroaches. They're a group of people that work for the intelligence agencies that get along socially. And I knew them all. They trusted me. I formed a loose network of about 15 or 20. We met for breakfast every week in the members' dining room in the Capitol. And they would feed me raw data. Then I would go to the classified briefings using that raw data, and I would ask questions of the CIA in front of the entire committee. And in many cases, I was the acting chairman because the chairman wasn't there. So here I am, the acting chairman of the entire Committee of Armed Services that fully embarrassed the intelligence agencies. And I'll get into that when we talk about the 9/11 information and post 9/11 where they put bin Laden. The point is that the agency plays games with Congress. The Congress thinks it's getting good information, and it's not.
Yes.
The agency wants members fighting with each other over stupid things so they can do what they want. And it's not all. There are good people in the agency,
yes,
that I worked with and I would go to war over. But there are some scumbags. I know those scumbags. At the appropriate time, I'll name those scumbags who have made millions and millions of dollars and are making millions and millions of dollars today. They're making it in Ukraine. They're making it around the world because of context they established. And all that ties back to their positions that they got, supposedly working intelligence for the U.S. That's not what this country's all about.
So give us the timeline. So you, 9/11 happens, you keep ascending in Congress, and you really, and I remember this well because I interviewed you on these topics at the time, 20 years ago when your book came out. And you start saying, wait a second, the U.S. government really blew this. There are people who knew this was happening, was going to happen, and for whatever reason didn't stop it. And you're really the only Republican who's saying this. And then 2006, you're up for re-election. It's an even year, of course. And you're from your district in Pennsylvania after 20 years. And out of nowhere, the FBI raids your daughter's house. And we're all told it's because she's corrupt, you're corrupt, et cetera, et cetera. And then you lose, and we kind of lose track of you, and Washington goes on as it does. And no one talks about 9/11 again. I think that's fair to say. I mean, I was there. I remember when all this happened, though.
Covered it all.
I didn't put it together in my head at all until about a year ago. I was thinking about this in the shower. Whatever happened to Curt Weldon and his daughter? So I go on the internet. I'm like, is Curt Weldon's daughter in prison because she's so corrupt? Like,
Never talked to.
So what happened? So
okay, well, here's what happened.
2006.
In 1999 and 2000, they wanted me to run for chairman of the committee and jump over 4 or 5 members.
Which committee? The
Armed Services Committee. But in Congress, the protocol is you wait
of course.
time. Then 9/11 happens. I felt personally responsible because I knew that we could have prevented it by the information that the Able Danger team established by General Hugh Shelton had gathered and tried to transfer 3 times and were blocked. So I said, I owe this to Ray Downey. I'm wearing his jacket today. I owe this to the firefighters in New York and around the country to get to the truth. If it's the last thing I do, and I owe it to all those soldiers that we're now sending overseas.
That's right.
So Tucker, with Al Santoli, whom you know, and 2 other members of Congress, I privately, without the knowledge of our government or the CIA, I went to Paris. We met with King Zahir Shah, the king of Afghanistan, who was living in exile with his family in Paris. We met with him to convince him to go back to Kabul to convene a Loya Jorga of all the tribes, to convince them to accept the American troops before they went in, so it wouldn't be like they did with Russia. King Zahir Shah agreed to that. I'll give you the photographs, Tucker. And I had 2 members of Congress and Al Santoli with me, decorated Vietnam veteran. Zahir Shah went back. I did all I could to protect our American troops, not the CIA, our troops. Then I find out my intel team, those 20 people that were feeding me raw data, give me data within months after 9/11 that bin Laden's been sighted in a town called Ladiz. It's not in Afghanistan. It's not in Pakistan. It's in Iran, in an area called Baluchistan. So I go to the next classified briefing for the full committee. Now I'm the vice chairman of the full committee. There are 60 members. I'm the acting chairman at this time. So I said to the CIA, I have information that bin Laden's in Ladiz. This is their response to me. Mr. Chairman, we've heard similar reports. We can either confirm or deny them. I was in shock. We're sending kids to die in Afghanistan, and we can't confirm or deny whether or not bin Laden's in Ladiz? 3 months go by. I'm still supporting the president. My intel team comes back to me and say, Curt, he's being treated at a military hospital outside of Tehran. I go back to the classified briefing and I ask the question in front of the full committee. And the answer from the CIA is, Mr. Chairman, we've heard similar reports. We can either confirm or deny that bin Laden is being treated at a military hospital outside of Tehran while we're sending kids to die in Afghanistan. I said, this is outrageous. And then, Tucker, I get a call from Jack Murtha, the most respected Democrat in the House, former Marine, who I work with closely. And he says to me, I want you to meet with Ron Klink, Democrat from Pittsburgh. And Ron Klink's still alive. He'll verify this, Tucker. Jack's dead, but Ron's alive. He said, Jack has a person who used to work for the agency that has information about Iran. And you investigate this kind of stuff, Curt. Will you meet with him? I said, sure. Ron Klink comes to my office and brings this very tall man who's a former person from the Swedish area, but he's a U.S. citizen. And I said, how can I help you? You know, Congressman Murtha asked me to help. Ron Klink wants me to help. He said, Congressman, I want you to help me get into Iran. I said, why do you want to go to Iran? He said, that's where bin Laden is. I said, why would you tell me that bin Laden's in Iran? He said, I was a knock for the agency. Do you know what a knock is?
Yeah, non-official cover.
That's right. He said, I was a knock for the agency, and I worked that area. And my friends are seeing bin Laden in Iran. If you help me get to Tehran, I'll leave my identity there. I'll get a piece of him, dead or alive, and I'll bring it back. At the time, there was a $25 million reward for bin Laden. I said, I can't help you right now because I'm in a battle over this follow-up to 9/11. Then I get another call, Tucker, from the Interior Department, totally separate. They want to bring in their top bird man. So this Interior Department bird expert brings in a U.S. citizen from Maine who's a Sikh, but he's a U.S. citizen, very wealthy family. And he's got 2 falcons on his shoulders, $1 million birds with the blinders on, beautiful, into my office. I said, good boy, they're gorgeous. How can that be? He said, well, Congressman, I've devoted my life to falcons. He said, I helped write the UN protection treaties on falconry. He said, I trained all the children of the royal families in the sport of falconry.
Yes.
Because that's their sport. He said, they all know me. They all trust me. They
in
all
the
like
Arab
me.
world, it's huge.
Yes.
Yes.
He said, so, and I want to help the country, and there's a reward for bin Laden. I said, yeah, I know that. He said, I want you to help me go to Iran. I said, why do you want to go to Iran? Now, he knows nothing about anything else I'm doing. My falconers are seeing bin Laden's birds flying in Iran. You help me go to Iran, they'll accept me there because they know me. I'll tag his birds, and I'll take the U.S. to exactly where he is. That's four full source identities that bin Laden was exactly where my intel people said he was.
But can I just ask you to pause for 1 second? So you had a lot of evidence, it sounds
Absolute
like,
evidence.
that bin Laden was not in Afghanistan or Pakistan,
Right.
where he was supposedly ultimately killed. Not in Iraq. He was in Iran. But Iran was also in the crosshairs of the Bush administration. It was part of the so-called axis of evil at the time. People were talking about invading Iran then. Why would the Bush administration hide the fact that...
It wasn't the Bush administration.
Oh?
Let me explain to you. And this is what Trump needs to understand. It started under Clinton, when the Clinton administration, Bill and Hillary Clinton, who I have no respect for, were allowed to be themselves to be used so they could make money. Tens and tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, because they allowed people, unscrupulous people, to control the agenda in Russia and around the world. It continued under Bush Jr.
Yep.
As I said, up until 2000, they wanted me to be chairman. All of a sudden, when I started questioning 9/11, all of a sudden the Bush people said, whoa.
Yeah, I bet.
John Sununu, after I was out of office, who I had a lot of respect for, was Bush's chief
smart
of
man.
staff.
Yeah, I know.
I was in his office, and they said this to me. He said, Congressman, you were a great member. Everyone respected you, but you made one fundamental mistake. I said, what was that, John? He said, when you come to this city, you're either on one rail or the other rail. And you went down the middle and took on both rails. I said, well, John, I didn't pledge allegiance to the Republican Party.
Yeah.
I pledged allegiance to the Constitution. You guys were ecstatic when I took on the Clintons, when I took on Sandy Berger, when I took on the scumbags and what they did with China and Russia. You were ecstatic. But then when I saw things happening at 9/11, all of us, he said, well, that's why you're not here. I said, you know what, John? So be it. It's not the end of my life. And one day I'll tell the story, John. One day I'll tell the story, because that's what America needs to hear. They need members of Congress who don't become duped by scumbags in the intelligence agency making money for themselves. And you know what, Tucker? I challenge them. I'll name them, and I'll give their dollar amounts of where they're making money today in the countries that we're at war with. They care about themselves and their power. They don't care about the lives of the kids that we send to war. I saw it in Libya. I saw it in North Korea. I led delegations that were bipartisan to all of those places. They took it out on my daughter.
So I just want to get one more time to the question of who was hiding the fact that bin Laden was actually in Iran. And
Our intelligence agencies, they have plausible deniability. In the end, I have 10 silver bullets, including 2 royal family members from 2 different royal families, from 2 different countries, including, in the end, the person that was in the room, who was a knock for our government for 50 years. He's not from the U.S. He's become a friend of mine. He's been to my home. We've met dozens of times. And on one of my trips to the Middle East, he said to me, he calls you, my dear, you were right. I said, about what? He said, about a lot of things. But you're right about bin Laden. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, he was placed in Iran, in Baluchistan. He said, I said, he said, He said, yes, I know that. He said, I was in the room when the deal was cut. So the U.S. has plausible deniability that they weren't in the room.
Was the point to get to Iraq?
The point was to the point was to manipulate, to get our troops committed, to go over to fight the battles in Afghanistan, Iraq, and that whole region of the world.
Yes.
And they had to have the justification to do that.
I believe it.
But in the end, when 5 years ago, and even Trump doesn't know this, I'm sure, we killed someone that Trump took great credit for, and I applaud him for it. And he said, we killed this guy.
Soleimani.
That's right. Soleimani was the guy the deal was cut with. The deal was not cut with the Iranian government. And we need to understand that. And this is the heart of what we have to get to. The Iranian people are not our enemy. I wrote this book in 2005, Countdown to Terror. It's all about Iran. It says that the people of Iran are not our enemy. The book was so popular that the people of Iran published it in Farsi. There it is. And they published the book. Without my approval, they published my book. It became a bestseller in Iran because it said, you're not the enemy of the American people. Here's what happened, Tucker. When the Shah was in power, think back, we were best friends with Iran.
Of course.
Our intelligence people trained the Iranian intelligence people. We trained them. They were our people. When the radical Ayatollahs and the mullahs took over Iran, they did not bring in a new intelligence service. They did not change the agency. The IRG stayed the same. The deal to place bin Laden in Iran wasn't cut with the Iranian government. It was cut with Soleimani. And that's why we killed him. Our intelligence agency has tentacles around the world. And they're not answering to anybody. And that's the problem right now. That's the problem Trump has. Yeah, he can cut off the security clearance of 51, but that network extends far and wide around the world, and they can play all the games they want in Ukraine, in other countries. And until we go after that, this is not going to stop.
That's consistent, all consistent with what I've seen.
The problem with the members of Congress is that they're good members in both parties, but they get staffers who have career goals, and their career goal might be to go work at the Pentagon or go work for the agency.
Yes.
So they get compromised midway through. You can't have that. You got to have people to understand their loyalty has got to be for the country and for what their original goal. And that's why it's so important that the ultimate goal here is to have this presidential commission on 9/11 to hold people accountable and to let the president appoint a commission that asks the questions of what really happened, both intelligence-wise and with the actual structure, so that we understand, and then we make those people accountable. Believe me, when we do that, then you shake the system up.
I agree with that, and I think it's really important to begin declassifying a lot of things that the U.S. government has done with our money in our name over the past 60 years. Starting with the Kennedy assassination, MLK, RFK, et cetera, et cetera. I think we should know what happened in Butler Township in July. But I think the big story is 9/11, and
the reason is all those happened decades ago, and I agree with you. 9/11 is only 24 years ago, and I have all the information. I have the firefighters ready to go. I have the tapes of the firefighters and what they saw and heard. I have all the architects and engineers and all their 3,000 of them risking their careers. I have the lawyers. I have the families. Everybody's ready to go. All Trump has to do is name a new presidential commission. Let them do the investigation. We'll give them all the material, and then we'll show the country that we will not allow these people to commit these kinds of they're not even unscrupulous. They're outrageous and scandalous and traitorous acts against our nation. Imagine planning to kill American people. I can't begin to think of that.
Okay, so, but you've also just said that two friends of yours died of fast-moving cancer.
I don't know that.
They died of cancer. Right. But you think that the people who are hiding the truth about 9/11 are capable of murder?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, I guess that would be obvious since 3,000 people were murdered that day.
Just like Libya. We were the ones that caused Gaddafi's death because Hillary Clinton played a game over there. And I was the one that went over there during the war. Gaddafi asked me to come over. I took a Biden staffer and a Bush staffer and a film crew leader from ABC One in New York, Larry Menti, with me, and a cameraman, because I didn't want the CIA to set me up. I hand carried the letter back from Gaddafi offering to resign. The U.S. didn't want him to resign. They wanted to kill him.
Why?
Because Gaddafi, and I met him 3 times. I took Biden on my second trip to Libya, by the way. He went with me when I spoke to the whole country. At every meeting I had with Gaddafi, he wanted 2 things. He wanted to unite the African continent into a group of nations economically, like the European economy. He wanted to base it on the gold standard. And the U.S. and Europe didn't want that. And the other thing is they wanted control of his oil, and they wanted control of his sovereign wealth. So Gaddafi had to go. That's outrageous, and it's wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, but we've allowed so many of our kids to be drawn into conflicts, to be killed. And these people doing this they've never served in any capacity in our country. They've never been in the military. They've never served on a fire ground. And it's outrageous that they think they can get away with this and sit back and make all this money. It's outrageous.
I couldn't agree more. So, Let's get to 9/11 itself. And you were so deeply involved in so many parts of this personally that I think it's easy to go off on different tangents, but just to the extent that you can describe what you know to be true, you said don't want to speculate as to motive, for example, but what you know to be true, what do you think the core truth of 9/11, September 11th, 2001 is?
I don't, at this point in time, I have my own perceptions. I don't have something I can give 100%. I can't swear on, but what I'm seeing bothers me to the core of my body, that 9/11 did not happen because a group of hijackers got control of some planes. First of all, I have confirmed that 2 of the hijackers that were on one of the planes in New York were working for the CIA. They were on the CIA payroll. And that was confirmed to me by someone in writing from one of our agencies, and I have that letter. So 2 of the people involved were actually working for the CIA in one of the planes. I know that. And they lost control of them. And there were reprimands against those agency people after the fact. Second, I know the intelligence, they tried 3 times to transfer the information about information that could have prevented 9/11. That's fact.
To the Justice Department.
And I have the name of the person that at the Justice Department they contacted, and she was told to cancel the meetings. They couldn't have the meetings.
Who did that order come from? Who?
That's what needs to be investigated.
Okay.
And then we have John Crane, the Inspector General of the Pentagon, who went to the extent of issuing a request for whistleblower status because he was told to lie to the Congress and lie about pre-9/11 intelligence and able danger. And then we have General the book by the General and his comments that he knew within seconds. None of this is in the 9/11 Commission report. The 9/11 Commission report is a piece of garbage.
Tell us, like, from an engineering perspective, like, what you had 3 buildings come down, sort of collapse in on themselves, implode, it looked like. And like a lot of people have said, many credible, non-crazy people have said that was controlled demolition. Was it?
Well, when I got up there the day after, I had been in the Trade Center at the restaurant on the top several times. There's no way those 2 buildings could have collapsed into what they were there. Something had to happen.
Was that obvious to you immediately?
Yeah, absolutely. Because, and they were looking for other firefighters like Ray Downey and the 342 others that were trapped and eventually vaporized. So something happened. Whether there's a high explosive material, I think it's called fermite, that is used to explode metal and steel and vaporize it. Those tests were never done on that. There were some limited tests that found that there was some evidence of that, but the whole thing never was subjected to the kind of investigation that would be warranted when 3,000 people die. I mean, when you have 3,000 people die, you would think it would be a full massive investigation, not going after 9/11, obviously, but what happened to the buildings and why they come down. They're the only high-rise buildings in the world that have ever come down from an airplane hitting them. And those buildings, I read the report from the architect who designed them. They were designed to withstand an airplane hitting the building and standing tall.
And especially Building 7, which had no plane hit it. Right.
No plane hit it. And the building you can see it when you watch it on TV, it just implodes straight down. And what really got me again was Oriole Palmer, the battalion chief, arising on the...
Well, tell us who he was. What is...
Okay, Oriole Palmer was one of the most inspirational battalion chiefs in New York.
At FDNY.
FDNY, who immediately, in very good shape, had a family, a couple of kids, went into the building as soon as they got on the scene, took the elevator up to the 40th floor, got off the elevator, and you can hear him on the comm system say, "I'm here, 40th floor, we're going to start walking up the stairwells." Every 5 floors, he radios back to communication. "I'm on the 50th floor. Everything's okay. We're on floor 60. Everything's okay." He's going up. Every so many floors, he gives a report. He reaches the 78th floor, the floor of impact. He comes out of the stair tower. And as clear as you listening to me here, and I know I get passionate and I apologize to your listeners for that. He says, "We're on floor 78, the floor of impact. We've got 2 fires and we can handle them." 1 minute later, the whole building collapses. That's not normal. That is not acceptable. That is not what happened.
And this is on tape?
It's on tape. The film is called Bravo 7. And if your viewers want it, if they contact you, I'll give it to you. It's free. It was produced not by Hollywood. It was produced by firefighters. and it includes the footage, including the firefighter, the footage of the firefighter communication between him and the command center. You can hear him as plain as day saying, I'm on the impact floor, floor 78. We have 2 fires here. We can control them. And he's comfortable. He's not worrying about the building collapsing. He just walked up 38 floors and the whole building collapses. Tucker, it's a big lie.